Record. Perfect timing. All right, welcome everybody. Good morning. It is Friday the 13th, the last Friday the 13th of the year, and there's three next year, if you didn't know that. Well, thank you. We're gonna have a few people trickling on, I'm sure. So thanks for jumping on this Friday morning. Excited to go through a bunch of our content on career visioning, how to find and hire talent in your world. I assume there are two types of students on today. One group is here for the CE. So if you're here for the CE, go ahead and just shut your cameras off and go back to bed. We'll take it from here. If you're here to learn something about hiring people, let's get the chat going. If you don't mind throwing in there, maybe what you're hoping to get out of today. Normally we do this class live, but we had several people around the state that was wanting to navigate through this content. So if you want to throw in the chat why you're here, are you looking to hire someone? Have you recently made some mistakes hiring and you're looking to improve those? Or you just generally want to get ahead of the curve and get the skill set? I think I started taking career visioning, Gordon, what, maybe like 2 years before I finally hired someone just to make sure I got it as right as I could the first couple times, but it's a long process, no doubt. So, and we've got some very experienced managers here, some leadership. So thanks for being on. And Kimber, shout out to Kimber and Gordon for getting the CE certified. They're awesome at getting these classes certified. So you're double dipping on the content and CE. Thank you, Steve. You're always filling my bucket. You're so nice. Well, let me navigate a little bit through who I am, just in case we have never met, and why I may or may not be qualified to teach this content. Right now, my name is Johnny Christensen. I am the regional director for KW Utah. We have, Gordon, what was the final number? 1,477 members of the KW family around the state. We might have some guests on here, but we've got a fantastic company, still number one in all the categories out there. I was a team leader, like a few of you. Steve's on the call. He's the team leader in the South Valley office. I was a team leader for a decade, probably the hardest job I've ever had, no doubt. It is a lot on your plate, but you do a lot of hiring, a lot of recruiting appointments. You're hiring a leadership staff team for your office. Over that 10 years, I added it up once. I think it was somewhere around 6,000 recruiting appointments where I'm sitting down trying to determine the talent level of someone either getting into the industry or migrating over to our company. So a lot of appointments, no doubt, but also a lot of W-2 employees. I am the majority owner of KW Westfield, which is one of the franchises here in Utah County. We launched, put a group together and got into insurance and title the last 5 years. I also put a group together and career visioned our Argentina core group down there. So I own part of the master franchise down in Argentina. And I got a text this morning. They just launched another office. So I think they're up to 11 market centers down there. We've got about 800 agents and trying to navigate through this career visioning process across borders was a great learning lesson. Even though our behavioral KPA personality assessment didn't totally translate to Spanish, but I still used 90% of that to make sure that we had the right core group leaders to launch that country. And my longest venture has just been with my real estate partner, Clay Winder, superstar. He's one of the few people I know that's closed over 100 transactions in a 12-month period. He's a deal doer for sure, but we co-own the Red Sign team. And we've been rolling for what, about 15, 16 years with Red Sign Team. So fantastic organization. We usually sell around 250, 300 homes a year just across the Wasatch Front. So thanks for being on. But I have held a lot of appointments when it comes to trying to attract talent into our organizations. So kind of want to share some of those tips and tricks. Often people like to see kind of how my world's laid out. On my left side, I call it my business side, swapping time, money, energy over here just to make some income. These are all my businesses that we've got. And then on the right side is kind of all my assets, a lot of my entities I own with people. And if there's one thing that I've learned through the many businesses and assets that I've been involved in, it is a lot more fun when you do it with someone. I actually don't own a single company 100% because I think you miss out on an opportunity of just bringing in some great people and sharing in just the ownership decisions, but also it's just not as fun. So I definitely like bringing in high talent. So raise your hand, those of you who have a camera on, who has had their KPA completed, or you actually just performed and did your KPA? Looks like a bunch of you. So here I'm going to give you a peek behind the screen, just in case you've never seen this. This is when the leadership member, normally you have to order your KPA until they integrate it a little bit more into command. Normally you have to order your KPA through the leadership liaison in your local market center. The market centers actually pay for a subscription through our KPA department at KW. Most of our market centers have it, but then that allows us to order these KPAs, which a good chunk of what we're going to talk about today is just kind of navigating that tool. I think it is probably the most underutilized, most valuable tool that we have at Keller Williams. So I'm constantly kind of preaching at the rooftops on using this tool in all your avenues, even just practicing it with loved ones in your life, just so you can kind of get a little bit more familiar with the tool. But if you yourself have not had this ordered, normally they make that a requirement on the full version of career visioning that you have to have had that completed to actually jump into this class. This is the accelerated Johnny's ADD version that is 2 hours long. Normally, this class goes 1 to 2 days long, just for the full content. So if you haven't done that, challenge you to reach out to just a Keller Williams leadership member and get your KPA ordered. It'll make a lot more sense. And as always, Gordon will post and record and distribute this out. So he's already got the slides ready to go. And then kwutah.tv goes to our YouTube channel, just where he posts these recorded classes. So here's a peek behind the screen of what the leadership member sees. This is basically, here's when I did my latest KPA. It looks like it was in 2016. Oh, hold on. Going back. But it will match up. This is normally what we don't, if someone's not gone through this course, normally a lot of times they don't understand there's two reports. There's the personal report right here, and then there's the job fit report. When someone takes the KPA, normally that's the report that we'll distribute to them just so they can kind of see how their behavior shows up. You know, there's no right or wrong, but as the consultant or the job hirer or the manager, whatever, there is a report that we'll be going through called the job fit report. The job fit report will actually match up their behavior according to the data bank of previous reports and success. So they basically determine what is the ideal behavior for each position inside of the Keller Williams ecosystem and beyond. KWRI jobs, market center jobs, even loan officer, a lot of other positions. But then they also dive into a lot of the team positions. Could be director of ops, could be director of lead gen, and it will match up and give you basically a score out of 1, maybe 100%. But you can see when I took mine, operating principal, which I am the OP of Westfield, I was 100% match for the operating principal job. If you look at productivity coach, 0.98, team leader, 0.97, you jump through some of these other ones, you'll see where I'm kind of a mismatch on those. But you can actually download the job fit report matched up against any position that they have the data for. So a lot of times, even if I start the interview process for one position, and I kind of determine over the editing and the verifying process when I'm sitting down with them that they might be a better fit for a different position, sometimes I'll transition that conversation into something else. Some of the best real estate agents on my team actually applied for assistant or administrative positions. Even some of the people that applied for agent jobs end up being some of our best hub or operations members. So just making sure you're kind of paying attention to that, but we'll navigate a little bit more through that as we go.
One thing to keep in mind on that report, if you send this out to somebody that you're thinking about hiring and their score levels are all low, that means they skipped through a good portion of all of the questions. So you're going to want to have them take it again.
Yeah, it'll show a mismatch. So if they're all just tremendous low scores, like you said, that usually just means something went funky with the report. You should probably just have them take it again.
What if they timed out?
If they timed out, it'll most likely, unless they were really close to being complete, if it timed out, it'll probably show mismatched scores. And it won't tell you the report was bad. It'll just show lows on everything. So that's why you just have them take it again. And I noticed that too when I was trying to have some of my Argentines take it. Even though they speak, it feels like perfect English. The sensitivity of vocabulary and meaning and just how that all shows up, it didn't work for them. So I had to actually unplug the KPA behavior component and plug in a Spanish version of the disc, and then everything else as far as the KPA goes, the consulting guide worked fine. Because again, the behavior, when you're looking at the job hire, behavior is only about a 25% of the overall look when you're going through this process. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So I really wanted to just cover three things today. So hopefully you guys will hang in there as we navigate through these. Number one is I added this last year when I taught this in one of the market centers, but I wanted to start by talking about who do you have to be or become to actually attract talent. You know, a lot of times, most of you are talented people, but who would you want to go to work for? And what type of leader are you looking for? So we'll navigate through that a little bit. And then number two, I kind of wanted to just get into the definition of talent. You know, we use that word a lot in our company, Keller Williams, but what does talent look like? And then we'll probably spend a good chunk of the time, maybe even in early, but on the KPA, the Keller Personality Assessment. So we paid, what was it? It was somewhere around $7 to $8 million a year for exclusive rights to corporate consulting's behavioral assessment tools. It's a very high, like you got the disc, but we had this one called the AVA, the activity vector analysis that we used for a long, long time. And Keller Williams was paying $7 to $8 million a year to be the only real estate company in the industry that had access to that. And eventually that number got so high that Gary Keller just decided to go out and build our own personality assessment and actually took the quality of that even up a notch. So that is our proprietary Keller personality assessment that we use only here in our company. So what does talent want? Steve, you've been around people a lot, like even you getting into business with people, like what do you want? What does talent typically want?
From looking at it from their perspective, the talent wants a secure job. They want to know that we're going to be having our doors open next month. You know, they want to be able to rely on us, right? They also want to do a job that they're comfortable doing, that they're qualified to do, that they're happy doing, and they also want to be respected.
Yeah, yeah. I would agree with all those. I also think, you know, I even just view me like internally. What do I want? Want to go work for an organization? And I want to be able to run as fast as I can and not end up running into some sort of ceiling above me. You know, most talent want to grow as big as they possibly can, grow an income as big as possibly they can, with not feeling like there's any sort of ceiling above them, right? Another one is they probably like to be surrounded by other talented people. You know, they like to be around other, you know, racehorses in the race. I would also say you know, they probably have a great moral character that they like to be around, you know, a great company culture, you know, and probably a few more things. But if you got a few more in there, what does talent want? Throw it in the chat. But here's a couple things. So I traveled down. My real estate team is in Gary Keller's top, you know, 200 club that he's had for a long time. We've been in it for about 10 years, and he does these exclusive masterminds, usually 2 to 4 times a year, where these rainmakers will go down and spend some time with Gary Keller. It kind of ends up not really being a mastermind under the definition. It ends up just being Gary kind of, you know, laying out his wisdom to us. But here's one time I flew down there. It was right when COVID happened, and I was expecting him to just give us a whole bunch of very strategic market, you know, information just to, you know, help us navigate the craziness that happened at COVID times. But what ended up, the whole conversation ended up being about is just our own authentic self and really just our own MVVBP and our own direction and purpose, which at the first hour or so I was like, why is he talking about this? And then once he kind of get in the groove of it, it made a lot more sense on getting you right before you go to try to lead talent. But I want to go through a handful of those things. This isn't necessarily part of the revisioning, but who do you have to become to attract talent is this first part. So how do we get stuck in the middle? You know, there's massive success on the right side, there's complete failure on the left side. Most people just kind of hover right in the middle at average. To get to the middle of life at anything, all you have to do is what you like to do. If you want to get to the right side of average at anything that really matters to you, you must move past what you want to do and do some things you don't want to do. In other words, the measure of your success in life is in direct proportion to what you're willing to do when you don't want to do it. Um, Tentative effort. Tentative effort leads to tentative outcomes. Therefore, give yourself fully to your endeavors. Decide to construct your character through excellent actions and determine to pay the price of a worthy goal. The trials you encounter will introduce you to your strengths. Remain steadfast, and one day you will build something that endures, something worthy of your potential. So we're going to talk about authentic self. So destiny is a future scenario. My destiny is my future scenario. Destiny is not a matter of chance. It is a matter of choice. It is not a thing to be waited for. It is a thing to be achieved. Destiny is a decision I make. My destiny awaits my decisions. Authenticity is simple. It is when my values and beliefs are mirrored by my thoughts, emotions, words, and actions. When my mission and vision for my life are powered by my values and beliefs, and these manifest into specific thoughts, emotions, words, and actions, I am living my authentic self and my best life possible. If you've ever read any of John Maxwell's books, one of my favorite ones is his 5 levels of leadership. Talks about the first level being position. Leaders that try to just go lead out of position, it only lasts so long. If you end up hiring someone, they might, follow you just for a short period of time, but eventually you have to climb those levels of leadership to truly have someone want to just live their life being attracted to your level of talent. But the very top one is just who you are and what you represent. And if you're trying to attract people into your organization and you're not clear not only on where the organization's going and what the goals and the vision of the organization are, but they're also going to be attracted to who you are as a person, what you represent, the leadership skills you possess. And a lot of that is just getting really clear on your mission, your vision, your purpose, but then living that mission on a day-to-day basis. So if you've not done this exercise, uh, just text me, email me. I can send you just this blank document, but write down and actually go through the process of trying to put pen to paper on what your mission is for your life. What is your vision? What are the values or the beliefs that you're willing to sacrifice something to protect? And then even what is your perspective? So let's talk about your authentic self and being self-aware. So personality, while important, is rarely the indicator of success. Personality is potential. A study by the Cornell School of Industrial and Labor Relations found that self-awareness, not personality, is the strongest predictor of a successful career. Knowing your own strengths and weaknesses enables you to work with others who have different skills and experiences. Self-awareness also allows us to more readily accept ideas and perspectives that differ from what we know or think can have value. Conversely, a lack of self-awareness comes off as rigidity, stubbornness, or an intractability that alienates others. My favorite line on here is their study said that self-awareness, not personality, is the strongest predictor of a successful career. Self-awareness. Raise your hand if you think you are self-aware. Do you consider yourself a very self-aware person? All right, I set you up. Um, so here is the more power. So 95% of people believe that they are self-aware, but only about 10 to 15% really are. So 95% of people think they're self-aware, but only about 10 to 15% really are. The more power a leader holds, the more likely they are to overestimate their skills and abilities. We ever ran into that in the world? The more power a leader holds, the more likely they are to overestimate their skills and abilities. One study of more than 3,600 leaders across a variety of roles and industries found that relative to lower level leaders, higher level leaders more significantly overvalued their skills compared to others' perceptions. In fact, this pattern existed for 19 out of 20 competencies the researchers measured, including emotional self-awareness, accurate self-assessment, empathy, trustworthiness, and leadership performance. People rarely speak truth to power. No one wants to tell the emperor they have no clothes. That is the challenge. When you have people in your organization, it is likely that they're going to be as direct and authentic as they should be on actually being clear to the leader on what challenges they may or may not have. People rarely speak truth to power. No one wants to tell the emperor they have no clothes. The only way a leader can gain true self-awareness is by examining their own beliefs, thoughts, actions, strengths, and weaknesses, and working to know themselves and better themselves. The bottom line, the more I work on myself, the better I can be, my results can be, my career can be, my business can be, my life can be. Know thyself is an imperative directive for anyone who wants to maximize their potential and live their best life. Another activity I challenge you to do is just a document like this. I can send you this too, but just your strengths. Like do a self-evaluation. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What should you be doing more of? What should you be doing less of? And then try to even identify your superpowers. Everybody has their own unique abilities, their own superpowers, but try to identify them. And then the next challenge I'd have for you is take this exercise and go find the 5 people closest to you in your life. Could be family, friends, coworkers, whatever. Who do you spend the most time with? Close your mouth and just ask them these questions and write down what they say. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What should you do more of? What should you do less of? And what do they think your superpowers are? I've done that about 2 or 3 different evolutions, and it was probably some of the most helpful things or data that could help me become more self-aware. All right. Any comments, questions on that section or ahas? Okay. So now let's talk about succeeding. So no one succeeds alone. Do you believe that? You are who you surround yourself with. If you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with in business, your level of success is going to be the average of the 5 people you hire. You start hiring people in your organization, the quality and the talent of the people you bring in are absolutely going to end up having an effect on you. Your level of success is going to be the average of the 5 people you hire. It's funny when I think about this principle. We've said this for decades, right? You are who you surround yourself with. Even now, having my 2 boys get a little bit older, my 2 oldest are 13 and 14. They're in junior high, and it's been a big wake-up call on how involved I need to be on who they surround themselves with. I am way more engaged on who their friends are, what their names are, who they're talking to, all that sort of thing. I know which my kids' friends are the troublemakers. His name's Rocco, just in case you guys need to warn your own kids. Just kidding. Uh, but I am so attentive to that. But then sometimes when I do a self-reflection of me on who I'm spending my most of my time with, I somehow lower my standards sometimes, and having teenagers just reminds me, I'm like, I have to be very clear on who I'm allowing to be around me the most. So do a little self-assessment on that. I love this chart. This is owning a job versus owning a business. You get in the real estate world, and everything is I do it, I do it, I do it, right? And that is you having a job, a job. Even when you start bringing people into an organization with you, the we do it, you still end up having a job, right? But when you can transition to that next level, you have such great talent that they are doing it. Now you're talking that you have a business, okay? When they have their own bench, when your bench has their own bench of talented people, they have theirs, you now officially could call that an empire, right? So, empire builder, business leaders and builders, indispensable to growth, typically their track record and personality are result-oriented, decisive, and take charge. I want to attract empire builders. So when I'm looking for talent, I have to keep reminding myself of those 2 words, empire builder, so it just continually helps me hold the standard high. So, like I mentioned earlier, expand your vision to grow your business. Your world and your vision has to be so big that it can fit everybody else's vision and world or goals for their own world inside of your world. I've seen this happen often with Gary Keller. When Mark Willis, back in the day, Gordon, I don't know what year it was that he first became CEO. It was probably like early 2000s or something. But I remember it was the first time that a CEO came up to Gary and he's like, I want to make $1 million. And at that point, making $1 million in a CEO position in a real estate company was very foreign. And I remember Gary didn't get offended at that whatsoever. All he did is just start writing numbers on a paper, reverse engineering for him to make $1 million. This is how big the company would have to grow. And that just became the goals and the expectations of that position to help him get what he wants. So a lot of times you digging into your people's goals and how big of a world do they need to just reverse engineer that into how big your world's going to need to get. Gary's even on stage has said, he's like, I had no intentions of growing the #1 real estate company on the planet. But he's like, I'll tell you, when you start attracting very talented people into the organization and they have big goals for their life, It just then pushes you and requires you to build a bigger organization to help them succeed at a high level. Even Gary, Gary has 5 people reporting to him at any point. Even as the company, when we started in 1983, Gary had 5 people reporting to him. Now we have over 200,000 people in our company. Guess how many people report to Gary? 5 people. 5 people. But again, how talented are probably those 5 people to then go lead the other 199,000 people in the company? So no matter how big your world gets, you've just got to be upgrading and having the highest level talent in your 5. So what is talent? What is talent? So talent is a motivated person who is a perfect match for the job that is the next logical step along their career path. A perfect match. A person is the perfect match when they have the knowledge, skills, track record, and personality to get the job done and are a cultural fit in line with the organization. The story I like to tell on that number 3 point, that is the next logical step along their career path. So when I hired, some of you know Shoney Ivans, he's the team leader here in Westfield. He is such a rock star. I love that guy. I could trust him with a briefcase full of money for a decade. I'd come back, he'd have it ready for me. He's just such a good human. But I'll tell you, when I had a team leader vacancy and I wanted to actually go talk to him, I was almost a little intimidated that he was too big for the job. Like he was too big of a rock star that he would actually be interested in the team leader position. I knew he was a motivated person. I'd done the research and actually known that he has a very high match for the team leader position. But the number 3 is where I actually had a great aha when I hired Shoney, is when I approached him about it. I introduced the job to him. We started going down the road. He told me one thing once that he said, I feel like the last 10 years of my career and all the steps that I've taken have led me to actually taking this team leader position. He feels like all the growth like just naturally led him to take on the team leader position. And it was such an aha that that is the next logical step along their career path. Will he be team leader forever? Probably not. But it was such a natural next logical step for him in his career path that just made sense to him. So let's talk non-talent in a role versus talent in a role. You're welcome to shout them out. Talent in a role finds solutions. Gordon, non-talent brings you what? Problems
Headaches.
and headaches, right? When something happens in an organization, talent typically will find solutions or bring the problem with recommended solutions. A lot of times, non-talent, they're only wanting to bring these problems to you, dump them back off on your plate, and they want to run away, right? Talent in a role shares your goals and fulfills your needs as a natural byproduct of fulfilling their own. What you want is also helping them get what they want, and them getting what they want also helps you get what you want, right? Whereas non-talent doesn't fulfill your needs and ends up giving you back what? Pieces of their job. You ever had that before where you give them something, you sign them, and then they bring half of that back to your plate, right? Talent in a role knows what they want or is actively searching to know. Non-talent doesn't know what they want and isn't searching. Talent absolutely has just a tremendous ambition of going out and getting what they want, or they're trying to figure out what they want. Non-talent just doesn't know what they want or isn't searching. Talent in a role pushes you. Non-talent does what? They require pushing.
How
I'll,
uncomfortable is that in your position sometimes?
I'll tell you what my biggest pet peeve in life is slow drivers in the fast lane. My second biggest pet peeve in life is having to push people. It is exhausting pushing people to get what they want more than they want it themselves, right? That's the fastest thing that can burn me out is just pushing people. I hate managing or micromanaging. You have to get someone that pushes you.
Well, and sometimes that can be uncomfortable for you because you're not used to it either, and they push you in a direction you're not exactly comfortable with.
Yeah, totally. But even just talent, they're just constantly, raising the bar. Like, which is that next one? It's just talent is just they're like every day, every week, every month, whatever the cadence is, they're just constantly leveling it up. They hate that status quo. Non-talent in a role may not even know where the existing bar is set or even what bar you're talking about. I love that one. Non-talent may not know where the existing bar is set or even what bar you're talking about. Talent in a role demands to be associated with talent and attracts talent to them. Talent demands to be associated with talent and attracts talent to them, whereas non-talent doesn't care who they spend time with and repels talent from them. There's nothing that repelled talent more than just being around pessimistic, like mediocre people. They want to run away from those type of people. So again, if you go get a rock star in your organization and then you follow that up with a bunch of non-talented people, you're now going to eject that talented person out of your organization. You have to hold a bar for talent. And in other companies, big companies, you even think about tech companies that have giant budgets, they might have the ability just to hire masses and then they can kind of weed people out over, a period of time. You building your real estate business, you have to take a stand on the first hire, the very first hire. And then you have to take a stand on the second hire and the third hire. You just can't afford to have mediocre people in your organization. And then the last one, talent and role talks the language of action and results. Where non-talent, when they try to talk action and results, they can't back it up. It just feels like talk. It just feels like promoting speech, right? So I'll tell you, if you're looking to bring anybody in your world anytime in the next several years, print this off. I had this printed off and I have it right in front of my computer. I had that there for a decade because I'll tell you, as soon as I started going down the road with any sort of language of non-talent, whether it came out of my mouth or it came out of someone else, I want to be able to immediately recognize that. And sometimes you can slightly coach it, but a lot of times they might show up who they are.
Johnny, how many times did you have to go through this process to get your first real good key hire because you didn't follow the process?
Yeah, so Red Sign Team, Clay and I started Red Sign Team about a year after we were in the industry, but we officially started it in 2008. We went probably 3.5, maybe 4 years and had churned through, we churned through 11 different assistants, 11 different assistants. We kept hiring people and I hadn't really seen this yet. We were just doing the best we could, kind of out of our gut instinct. We didn't go looking for the models. I hadn't been to this class yet, and we went through 11 assistants. And a lot of it it probably was a reflection of my fault and my DNA on it because I didn't understand the process and I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't know how to recognize it. And I just allowed, mediocrity. And part of that is when I look at our agents around the state, they're like, oh, I want to hire my first full-time assistant. They're not clear on what they're looking for, so they just start throwing ads out. They start getting applicants in, and then they end up just choosing the best 7 that shows up because they don't know what a 10 looks like, right? I was hiring part-time assistants. I was doing shared assistants. I was looking for the most affordable, paid assistant. And it wasn't until after the 11th time that I was just so frustrated because every time I'd hire an assistant, we would give them, we'd spend time training them. It would end up costing us money. And then it always just ended up coming back to us because half the job would come back to us, or we'd turn someone over and we'd start over. And eventually, after those failed attempts, I said, screw it. I'm not hiring another person into our real estate team until I figure out how to do this the right way. And that was, I think, 2011. I went to career visioning physically. I flew there or we had it in the region 4 times that year. I read the MRA book 11 times. I had a goal to read it all the way through once a month that year. I ended up reading it 11 times. And it was at the end of that year, after I spent hundreds of hours in training and reading the leadership books and all those things, that I finally felt like we were ready. And we were drowning that year, 2011, just in deals. We were working 60, 70 hours a week. We really needed someone, but I just refused to hire someone because I knew it was going to cost us more time, energy, and money if I got it wrong again. And finally, that January 1st of 2012, I put ads out. I started recruiting talent. And that's where our first real true director of operation, Cameron Wilson, who some of you guys know, he showed up. He had gone down the road of sales. He didn't like it. He realized he was a lot better fit for operations. He started applying for some of those jobs. I met him and immediately recognized he was talent. 2011, Clay and I closed 60 deals, the two of us, 60 deals, the two of us. I had stepped out of production because I became team leader. When I finally found Cameron came in January 1st. We had him that whole year between Cameron being the anchor in the office, Clay running around doing deals. We went from 60 deals to 113 deals in 1 year with no more hires than that. Truly, the first talented hire in your organization should double your business, should double your business. And I'll tell you, Clay and I and Cameron all worked less in 2012, doubling our deals than we did in 2011. And part of that, you just have to hold the bar to talent. Take a stand, draw a line in the sand, and just take a stand that you will not bring someone in unless they're top talent. So there's three choices of talent. So let's go through those three. Number one is potential. So potential talent. Potential has the knowledge, skills, personality, and culture. Emerging, we use the word emerging. They have the knowledge, skills, personality, and culture. They haven't done that job yet, but they've done a different job right before, right? They have some sort of correlating experience, but it's not necessarily in the lane that you're trying to bring them in for. And then proven talent has the knowledge, skills, personality, culture, but they have a track record of success in that job, right? So they have been in that very specific job or a very close related job. But if you look at it, potential talent tends to be the cheapest. Proven talent that has the track record in that position, absolutely expensive. If you even seen OpenAI has recently hired Johnny Ivey. He was the device like creator for Apple. He's really the poster child of why the iPhone and just the sleekness of Apple products. They just hired Johnny Ivey, and do you think he came at potential dollar compensation? No way. He is probably one of the highest paid people in the tech world right now. But then also, proven talent, you really know they have the knowledge, skills, and track record. But like you can see on the right, the truth, emerging talent is the sweet spot. It's more predictable than potential talent and wiser long-term investment than spending money on proven talent. I think in most of you are probably here for your real estate sales business. I think emerging is a sweet spot for a lot of your administrative operation leadership in your hub. I think agents, if you bring on some agents in your organization, had you built out already the operation and admin like anchor of your real estate team, I think agents you might be able to take a little bit more chance on. But again, you can't take chances on that admin. It just could be devastating and put you back too much. Emerging talent, emerging talent. All right, let's talk about any questions on any of this? Identifying talent, any comments that you want to get out? And we can go totally off the agenda too if you have any specific questions on, my history or hiring or whatever too.
So Johnny, you're just basically stating that emerging talent is ideal for admin.
I think so. I think so. That like for example, Cameron. I could recognize the skills that he had. I could recognize the knowledge that he had. Like he was techie. I could tell that he was an SC, but he had some high I in him. So he was very steady. He was very reliable. He was very consistent. He had gone out and sold door to door the summer before that. And he did okay, probably in the middle of the pack, but it was more that he realized he does not want to be on the sales side of things. So he'd kind of already learned that lesson. But his most recent position, he was like an administrator at some company that was like going out of business or something. I can't remember the exact of it, but he had already had some correlating administrative management experience that made me willing to take a chance on him. Had he been in the real estate world? No, but I knew that emerging was a sweet spot. The potential, you get a lot of even just new agents to get in the business, and they're like, oh, I can't sell, so maybe I should go be an admin, and they'll go apply for, admin jobs. Not saying that some of them aren't great fits, but a lot of times they're just so potential that you have no idea if they're gonna to get in there. And I think one of the biggest challenges are a lot of our rainmakers have in the company is they they hire immediate they cheat the process of hiring that first administrative manager. They cheat the process. They just have one interview with them. They like them, so they bring them on, and they just take too much of a chance, and they wake up 6 months later and now they're spending more time trying to manage someone. They're not actually making more money. They have half the job back on their plate, but then they also, like the person. So the person kind of becomes their friend or their family. And then you just built a box around your business that is just a 7 leveled box. And you have to, that first hire, you just got to take a stand. And it's so crazy because when we hired Cameron, our ability then to go out and hire the next talented person was 50% easier. One person hiring a talented person, it's hard. But when you have two talented people now bringing on that third talented people, you have a culture at that point. You have a full-fledged, company business, which is cool to see. So personality, what is it? Individual patterns of behavior and thinking. Behavior is how a person acts, and then thinking, how a person prefers to process ideas and problems. So we view, it's so crazy when I see some of you, I see Barbara and Jake and Lindsay and Steve on my screen right now. Like we all have such a different perspective on life. We see life through a total different lens. We have different opinions and history and environment and family and all sorts of stuff, even though we're all right here in Utah, just a small little sliver of the planet. But the challenge that a lot of times our agents will make is they'll shortcut the process. They'll do the KPA or they'll do the disc or whatever, and then they try to stereotype that person solely off their behavior. Like that's almost why the KPA is the most important tool, but it can be weaponized if the consultant is not using it the right way. And because they'll put someone in a box and they don't go through this entire KPA job fit consulting guide process that is actually editing it and giving you the time and the pathway to actually truly get to know someone. And that's why some behavioral assessments, it's not great because our agents will shortcut it and then they think that that's a good enough decision. So let's talk about a pop quiz on personality. So is or is not. So say it out loud. Personality is or is not. Is skills, experience, education, or training. Is that personality or is it not personality? Is not. Is not. Skills, experience, education, training is not personality. The way someone processes ideas and problems is or is not. Is that personality? Is
Not.
personality. The way someone processes ideas and problems is personality. What about intelligence? Is intelligence personality or is not personality? Is not. Is not. The way a person acts and behave, is that personality? Is. Is personality. Values, beliefs, ethics, or motivations is or is not personality?
Is.
Is not. Values, beliefs, ethics, or motivation is not. A reason not to hire someone based on their personality is or is not? Is not. Again, personality should not be the sole decision making in hiring someone. So the three strengths of personality, number one is engagement. Number two is productivity. And then three, health and happiness. So number one, engagement. People who use their strengths every day are 6 times more likely to be engaged on the job. When you feel like your job description is utilizing your unique abilities, talent, skill set, you're 6 times more likely to be engaged on the job. Even one of the first pages of the MREA, Gary Keller talks about you spending your time, the majority of your time, in what are your unique abilities and talents. A ton of money will be a natural byproduct. The most unmotivated people on the planet, most likely, have you ever been somewhere and you just are talking to someone, whether it's, at a hotel or fast food or, you're somewhere where there's someone else on the other side of the customer experience, and you could just sense, like within a fraction of a second, that they hate their job. That just happened to me the other day. They're just like, you just know they're miserable. And I just want to shake them and be like, well, what are you doing? Go find something you enjoy. Not every part of a job you're just going to love, but if you can even spend a good chunk or the majority of your time in your sweet spot of things that you're great at, not only your happiness, your engagement, but your income just goes up. So again, if you don't know what some of your unique abilities and strengths or talents are, maybe do some of that work to do that. And the story on that is even when Clay and I partnered up on Red Sign Team, we wanted to go build a team. And the first 2, 3 years, We read the MREA, we thought a high D was the best behavior, because people in the company were talking about it. We tried to be the same person the entire first couple years of our organization, and we just butted heads. And it wasn't until we finally did the work on personality assessments, getting to know each other, our unique abilities and talents, we actually realized we are almost like totally opposite in things that we're good at, but we complement each other very well. And when we kind of learned to divide and conquer, that's when our team was going flatline and it just skyrocketed because we could kind of hang in there in our unique abilities. So even as staffs, teams, whatever, people around you, there's a lot of different tools and activities out there that can kind of help you learn about each other and where you complement each other, and then you support each other in those roles. Productivity. Simply learning their strengths makes employees 7.8% more productive and engaged. Their performance is higher, and they are less likely to leave their company. So your role as an employer, if you end up having somebody in the organization, you have to help them understand what their strengths are and then encourage them and recognize them and pull more of that out. And then the last one, health and happiness, the more they are able to use their strengths to do what they do best each day, the more likely they are to report feeling energetic, well-rested, happy, and respected, and the less likely they are to report feeling worried, stressed, angry, sad, or in physical pain. Let's skip a few of these. All right, we're going to just jump into the KPA now. Any comments or questions on any of those slides before we just kind of get into some live role playing on KPA? Okay. Raise your hand again if you have your KPA. Who's done their KPA? Who's been on the job fit consulting side of the KPA? Steve, have you done what? Jake, you've done some? Okay. So this is my live KPA. So we're going to just kind of walk through this. We're going to spend probably 30-ish minutes, and then we can really answer any questions or go any other direction that you guys want, but then we'll probably end a little early. Kimber, before I jump in this, do you need anything, Kimber, do you need anything on the CE credit?
No, we actually got it at registration. So you just have to stay. Just stay
Perfect.
and enjoy it. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So let's jump into the KPA. So at the beginning of the KPA, there's always going to be just like a quick summary for you as the consultant guiding someone through this. So here is just a quick little summary that kind of assume, Steve is going through my KPA. All right, here's the summary right there. This is matched up against the regional director job. So this is the actual KPA that I sent Scott Agnew, the regional owner of Utah, when I was going down the road of becoming regional director. But you can see overall, I have a high match for the regional director job. And then it really breaks it into these three chunks: high impact, personality traits. There's medium impact, and then there's lower impact. The gray bar is kind of the range for this position that you want your actual behavior to fit inside of. The black cube is my actual behavior. So clearly at the top, any of these greens, my black cube is sitting in the range that you want. So assertiveness, I'm right there in the middle. Clearly, they need a higher level of assertiveness for like a regional director job. You see spatial visualization, vocabulary, logical problem solving, rapid problem solving, sociability, even responsiveness, adaptability. Clearly, they want RD when you're working for corporate to be a little bit more adaptable. I tend to be very unadaptable, apparently. Optimism, structure, even intensity. And then it will actually go through and give a quick description. So assertiveness. Johnny is enterprising and assertive. He has confidence in his ability to take action and achieve goals. He seeks to influence people to make a major and timely impact. He welcomes the opportunity to take a leadership role in most activities. So I usually will just read all of these. I'll usually just read all these in preparation for that first meeting. Even adaptability. Look at that one. Johnny is a strong-minded person who will tend to have his own viewpoints and opinions. He can be influenced by strong arguments or practical reasons, but he will not alter his views just to avert conflict. Dang right, Kimber. Just kidding. Operating style, job considerations, but I'll just jump into the report. So here's even a cheat sheet. Assertiveness. So no behaviors matched up here, but this is just, all right, assertiveness on the low end is going to show up reserved. Achieve goals through cooperation and good planning, conservative in action, move slowly to action, faced with obstacles, tends to stop, reassess before moving forward. Even on the high end, if someone's behavior shows up on the high end of assertive, they're going to be very determined, they're going to be persistent, they're going to be direct, they're willing to move forward, take action, solve problems, maybe confrontational and stubborn. And then it just goes through all these other ones. So, at a minimum, when you are looking, we used to have a report called the missing persons report. So, say Kimber was wanting to hire a director of ops or an administrative manager for her real estate business, we would always go through and just jot down your dream candidate. What does that person look like? You know, they're very organized. They are good with AI. They're great with technology. They're very punctual. They show up on time. They're reliable. Like you might be able to go through some of those things, but I would also recommend or challenge you to print this off and go one by one. All right, on the high or low assertiveness scale, where would you want that specific match or that personality trait to show up for this position? And depending if they're sales or if they're ISAs or, you know, maybe agent services in a market center, like go through all of these and kind of just throw a number on them to help you kind of understand what you're looking for. And when the results come back, you're matching it up against your dream candidate versus matching against nothing. And then you just choose who the best candidate was. So now let's jump into the consulting guide. So this is the actual guide process. Now that you got that summary over, this is the guide process that when someone comes in, say Kimber's applying for a job, I have this printed off and I have this in my hands when I sit down with the candidate. And this is the overall schedule of the entire career visioning process. Step two, once you get the applicant to apply, you get this KPA completed, you're going to journey through the interview process with your candidates. So there is 4 pieces to the interview process. There's job fit verification, there's thought process, there's life story, and then there's motivational. So each one of those 4 is pretty much 25% of the interview process for you. So normally, when it comes to schedule, you could spend anywhere from an hour to 2 or 3 hours in each one of those sections. You should plan on anywhere from 4 to 6 hours if you were to navigate someone through all of the interview process. Obviously, if you get through the job verification interview and you deep down already know that they're not a match, unplug them. Don't by default take everybody through this because it's such an exhaustive process. Don't waste their time and don't waste yours. When you're ready to eject a candidate any time during this process, do it so you're not going down the road too far with too many people. Normally, a job, I might have 50 candidates. By the time I start weeding them out, even just in a simple screening interview, by the end of the motivational interview, I maybe have taken 2 or 3 full candidates out of 50 all the way through, just on, you know, conversion process. And then you get into the perspective and then kind of the commitment. But we're going to navigate through each one of these so you understand them a little bit more on that process. So here is, and again, this consulting guide is so built awesome. It gives you scripts for almost everything that we've talked about. So even when you sit down, Johnny, thank you for coming in today. The reason I wanted to meet with you is to get to know you better and understand some of the things that are important to you. And at the end of the discussion, we can both determine if it makes sense to continue our conversation. Even a decision point, you know, if Johnny is not a match, thanks so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. We are in the process of interviewing several other candidates and we'll be in touch. This role would not make the best use of your talents, as you can see, blah, blah, blah. So it's got, depending on which direction, whether you want to continue down the process or you're ready to eject them, it has a script for all of those that you can use as a guide. So here is the first section. So we'll just role play a little bit just on a handful of these and we'll keep rolling through. So this is the job verification or the behavior verification. So we already know how Johnny's behavior shows up. This is my chance to give Johnny the ability to edit it. So here's assertiveness. On a scale from 1 to 10, how accurate would you say each sentence is? Johnny is enterprising and assertive, and he has confidence in his ability to take action and achieve goals. He seeks to influence people and to make a major and timely impact. He welcomes the opportunity to take a leadership role in most activities. Johnny, on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rank that? Me personally, I think that's a 10. Okay, whatever the answer that you get, whether it's a 9, 10, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's always going to be follow-up questions it's going to recommend. All right, Johnny, well, what makes that a 10? Well, I do feel like I have the confidence, you know, to take action and achieve goals. You know, I do like to influence people. I'd like to make a timely impact. I like to move as fast as I can, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just writing notes when they're giving me this response. The number one recommendation I have for you as you navigate this portion is just zip your mouth. Be as neutral and quiet as possible. And when I say that, it's because that is the hardest thing for me to do because I'm a connector. I just want to be like, oh, that's how I feel. Oh, I did that too. Oh, I went to France once. You know, it's so common for us to seek connection with people. You don't want to do that. Remain neutral and just let them show up how they want to show up. What happens in a normal interview? They sit across from you and they're trying to get any sort of cues or information out of you so they can pretend to be whoever you want to be. When you sit down and interview anybody, they will always show up their best because they are trying to get whatever job they applied for. So the more neutral you are, the more it forces them to simply show up authentically and who they are. There's no right or wrong to this. We're just going through who you are. All right. So the next one, and there's probing suggestions, dig deeper. Sometimes even some of these words in these box might just feel a little off, but having done probably 250 of these KPA validations all the way through, I have received the majority of 8s, 9s, and 10s on this. Rarely you'll get a 5, 6, or a 7. I've never got even below that. This tends to be very, very accurate. You're just trying to find out why they think that's accurate. Okay. Why is it a 9? Why is it a 10? What would you change in the statement if it was a 9 or a 10? And then just tell me more. What's an example of that? But normally, when you start doing this, you spend a lot of time up front, and then you realize there's so many other questions of their other behavior that you start speeding up. You might want to just practice this. You're kind of just pacing it a little bit more consistently. So spatial visualization, let's even jump into, what was the one that I was bad at? Adaptability. On a scale from 1 to 10, Johnny, how accurate would you say this sentence is? Johnny is a strong-minded person who will tend to have his own viewpoints and opinions. He can be influenced by strong arguments or practical reasons, but he will not alter his views just to avert conflict. I would probably say 8.5. Honestly, I do think I probably still have a tendency to avert conflict every once in a while. Blah, blah, blah. I might go off. Okay, well, give me an example where something happened that you had a disagreeing opinion and then you had to avert conflict. Haha, nailed it. Um, so you just want to keep digging deeper. This is their chance to edit it, right? So that is that. So that is pretty much 1, 2 sentences on the job considerations 1. So it goes through all those different behavioral traits. There's like 11 of them. Then you're going to jump into job consideration 2, which has a few more of those. Okay. But then you jump into what's called operating style. Okay. So operating style, just the paragraphs are a little bit meatier. So decision making on a scale from 1 to 10, right here on the bottom right, how would you rate the accuracy of the following statement? Johnny most often relies on the strength of his own convictions, insights, personal authority to justify his action. He should, however, be willing to investigate, examine the facts, assess issues pragmatically, blah, blah, blah. On a scale from 1 to 10, Johnny, how would you say that was? Oh, I'd put that a 9 or whatever. And then I end up reading this a couple times just so they fully are hearing and understanding what it's saying about them. But then I just want to be taking notes. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons I take copious notes when I'm doing this is because it helps me be quiet. When I'm writing, it helps them continue to talk, is just another tip. So operating style, team dynamics. So you want to go all the way through that. And then the last part of the behavioral verification is this descriptive review. So Johnny's traits do not exist in isolation of each other. Each trait impacts the other. Below is an integrative view of Johnny. Read this section to Johnny and ask him to rate the accuracy on a scale from 1 to 10. So this is marrying all those attributes up into more of a paragraph description. I go paragraph by paragraph and ask simply 1 to 10, how accurate would you say that is, Johnny? So I'd read that whole paragraph as slow or repeat it. All right, 1 to 10, what would you say that is? Blah, blah, blah. And then once you're done with that, you go through the entire candidate report rating. So you're now done with the job verification, the behavior verification, and you still want to rate on a scale from 1 to 10, Johnny. How would you overall rate that entire behavioral report? I would say that's a 9. All right, well, what's most accurate? What's least accurate? Is there any of the comments that you want to do? And then once that's complete, boom, you've officially completed that section 1. Okay. That is probably the meatiest section out there. And now you would jump into the thought process, which is section 2. These last ones go a little bit faster. But any questions on the behavioral verification, the job verification portion? Simple questions, deep questions, philosophy questions?
I have
Okay.
a random question.
Yeah.
So, and this could be for not just this personality assessment, but I know you're familiar with a lot of others like DISC. What, or if any, are there times that someone would need to retake it? So I'll use myself as an example. The last time I took the KPA was 2020, and I personally feel like an entirely different person 5 years later.
Yeah.
But does this change that much? Like maybe I am like doing more and more, motivated and successful, but maybe this is the same. So what do you advise people on something like that of when they would need to retake it,
Yeah,
if at all?
and again, I'm a big fan of this one. Like, I still love some of the
Yeah.
ones out there. Disc, for example, like I like the disc. Once I started learning about the disc, and it's such a simple tool, I can manipulate that to have whatever outcome I want. I can be in high C, I can be a high S, high I, high D, whatever. The more complex, like this one, like it is very hard to manipulate this. It really is just an identification of who you are. The research shows somewhere around your mid 20s is when they declare that your behavior and your personality and how this might show up is pretty pronounced. So if they're really young, they can grow quite a bit. I actually thought, and I do think I was a lot more of an extroverted high I, and I got into leadership and stuff. I was holding people accountable, so early in my life. I think it kind of manipulated and changed me a little bit to show up more like a high D, but I'll tell you, normally it's pretty solid, but with the asterisk that sometimes there's, just life events, traumatic life events that can actually alter your behavior, divorce, marriage, kids, job transfers, deaths, that type of stuff. That can actually change someone's behavior, indefinitely. But for the most part, I've taken the KPA 3 times over a 15-year period. My results have shown up almost identical, and I think that's pretty true for the majority of people. But I think if you've taken it once or twice and it did slightly alter, could be that. And there's still more data pouring in. So when you go back to the very front of this, um, when you go back to the front of this right here, you have to click this refresh job status. I usually train all the leaders to do this because there's more and more and more and more reports being pulled. They're adding more jobs. Number one, there's more different jobs that you can match it up. We went from having like 1 page of jobs to 2 pages of jobs over the last like 7 years. So there's more positions to match your behavior up. But as technology and society evolves, I think the preferred behavior can kind of somewhat alter. Me and Nova Lee, my MCA, talk about this a lot. When she was hired, it was accountant only type of behavior. Now MCAs have to be accountants and high sociability, super retention oriented, people. It's almost like a hybrid position. So clearly the matched up behavior might be a little different that you want to double check on that too. Okay, let's go back to
Cool.
this.
That's helpful.
Thanks, Kimber. Any other questions before we jump into thought process? Okay. So out of practicality purposes, I sometimes will try to do both of these in one appointment. So usually when I schedule that first interview, I'll usually have them scheduled for 2 hours just in case. And I try to get through the behavioral verification and this thought process in interview 1. Okay. And the thought process interview is similar. You're basically just asking them questions and you're trying to just take some notes and write data. But instead of behavioral specific, you're trying to understand how their brain works. How do they think? So all these questions are way more open-ended. And a lot of you who have hired people, you might have seen some of these before, and you might have some favorites. You might even skip a few. But number one, like, what did you do to prepare for this interview? I actually thought that was a dumb question at the beginning, but I've learned that that's probably one of my favorite now because I like to see before this interview what was going through their head. Did they research our company? Did they Google stuff? Did they learn about things? Did they jump on your social media, whatever? What are your strengths? They might say some stuff, but what would your manager, your former broker, or whatever say your strengths are? Give me a couple instances of when you're trained well, when you were trained poorly. All these are really good questions. How do you set goals? I love that one. How do you set goals? Like hearing how they set goals, how do they accomplish them? How do they break them down? How do they actually like get in momentum of them? Here's another one. How do you motivate yourself to do things really well that you do not like to do? How long would you be willing to fail before you succeed at a task? How would you describe the relationship you would like to have with your coworkers? A lot of those. This is probably, I think, probably my favorite question on this document. But who are the three people you most like, admire, and respect, and why? And you're going to get an array of either parents, spouse, religious leaders. Warren Buffett, Johnny Christensen shows up a lot on this one. Just kidding. But what they're identifying and describing isn't who they admire, respect. It's typically who they want to become or who they actually even view themselves as. A lot of times, the mentors that you pick, you have aspirations to become them. So they're telling you who they are. Another one is, what is a good performer on the job? What is a bad performer on the job? They are also describing who they are. Well, what's a bad performer on the job? Well, people that show up late. All right, clearly, Johnny likes punctuality, if I'm going to say that, right? Why do you think you're a strong candidate for this position? Even this one's interesting. I like saying this one. If we don't get together on this job, Kimber, what career move will you make next? I actually like to see kind of what their other options are in their brain. Okay. Any of those other ones? All right. So this could take anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, but I tend to speed that up. Sometimes I'll skip a question here and there just to keep that one in one. But any questions on thought provoking? Okay. Life story. We can kind of zip past this one a little bit, but life story is, normally they'll submit their resume to you, but life story is like resume on steroids. So you basically start. I always say, all right, Gordon, since the last, completion of formal education, could be high school, could be college, master's, whatever. Let's actually dive in and go deeper into your life than you may have done that before. What is the first thing that you remember? And I will usually do this visually. I'll either have a flip chart or I'll have a big whiteboard up, and I will do exactly this. I'll say, all right, what is the first thing, Gordon, that you remember after your last formal education? Gordon, let's actually role play for just a sec, if you don't mind. I'm picking on you, Gordon.
I hate that.
I know that's why I picked on you. What's the last formal education you have? Where was it?
Almost finished my degree at the U of U.
Okay. And what year was that?
89.
Okay. So after you completed or almost completed whatever, what is the very first thing that you remember that you did after that?
I got my certification as a purchasing manager to
Great.
change jobs immediately.
What made you choose that decision?
I was miserable in my job and just became a single parent.
Yeah. And so what happened when you got that certificate?
I became a certified purchasing manager and started that career.
Cool. And did you like it initially?
Loved it.
Really? Like, what do you remember loving about it initially?
It's funny. I didn't think that I would use any of my accounting background that I was miserable in, and I ended up using it quite a bit.
Hmm.
And I liked the can't even
Systemization.
say it. Systematizing all of the stuff that I needed to do to get the job done.
Hmm.
And putting that into that role, just cleaning it up, because the job was a mess when I took it over. And it was just cool to put that all together.
Hmm. And I would keep going deeper with him on that. Like clearly that demonstrates that he's organized. He likes, controlling his environment. He likes being very, steady, consistent, that type of stuff. But think back at that same time, like when you started that first, handful of months, like was there any disappointments that you had? Like was there anything that you didn't like?
That it wasn't going fast enough.
Hmm. What do you mean by that?
I thought that I could organize things faster, and I didn't realize some of the things that were more difficult about the job, like production. I didn't understand the production side of how long it takes to do the graphics, for example, because I was doing a lot of the print work.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay, and then I just keep going deeper, deeper, but then we just move on to the next event, the next event. And oftentimes you find yourself having to slow them down because they want to just jump to the next major event. There was another time Gary, he called it, I forgot what it was called, Gordon, maybe you remember, but it was probably 8 years ago. He called all producers over 10 million to a special event in Austin, Texas. If you were over 10 million, it was going to be some super mega agent event in the convention center of Austin. We all get in there. And the very first thing he did is he put Monica Reynolds up on stage, who was the former president of MAP. She's been in a lot of executive roles for KW. But he went through this life story role play for 3 hours with Monica Reynolds. And there was probably 3,000 people in the room. It was 3 hours long, just going through. And I was just like, what is he doing? It's like the most boring thing to have 3,000 people spend thousands of dollars go down there. But he was so committed to like being an example and emulating what we need to be doing and how we need to slow down when we're going through the hiring process with people because he just saw so many mistakes popping up and the turnover of teams happening so much that he wanted to actually just demonstrate the proper way of doing it. And it took 3 hours just to go through this one piece with Monica Reynolds. And you're going to have stuff pop up that's personal. They're going to get into life events. You never want to be one that's probing those life events, but as you're going through this and you start establishing this rapport, it's just natural that things are going to come up and you're just asking questions on what they learned from it. Was it great? Was it bad? And even once they start getting into career, you can start going down the road of, what did your compensation look like that and kind of seeing the progression of their compensation throughout the history. But then basically, bam, you can close that out. A lot of times, if they've had a career for 10 years or longer, you're going to be at least 90 minutes kind of walking through that. If you do it in a short period of time, it's because you're not slowing them down enough. A lot of times, it should feel like a FBI background interview. And then the last piece of the interview is the motivational interview. This is a standalone document you can even just do now with anybody, but it's simply just going through, Kimber, if we were sitting down, 3, 5 years from now, and I say, how's the last 3, 5 years been for you? And you say, awesome. It's just been the best 3 years of my life. What has to happen, Kimber, for you to be able to say awesome? And then you kind of go through, you can draw this little box up there. We used to not recommend sections because they might jump to relationships, they might jump to health or something, but you do want job and money to be the first categories they talk about. And then priority 3 and 4 on kind of their goals and motivation could be any other avenues of life that they want to share. But normally, job, you want to get very, very clear what that looks like, and even money, what that looks like. So here's even some of the questions you might want to ask on that. But what has to happen in the job dimension of your life for you to be able to say awesome 5 years from now? How do you envision that? What does that mean for you? You probably need to even ask them, well, specifically tell me what that means. Like get more and more clarity, deeper and deeper. Why would that achievement be important to you? How would that make you feel? Normally, you're navigating from just total clarity on their goals to the next question 3 and 4 start to bring in the emotions to it. Logic makes you think, emotions make you act. You want to see how connected their emotions are to a lot of these goals that they're saying. And then simply your job as a consultant, if you end up hiring them, that becomes your goal of help that employee or that agent go out and get those things. Okay. So that concludes your 2 main chunks of interviews. If someone gets all the way past that, normally you'd go on to what's called a group interview. I know some of you on Market Center staff are somewhat used to that. You went through the process with just one person, but then they want to kind of see how you gel with people. It might even just be a lunch. It might end up just being a little group meeting. And the person that navigated you through the other interviews just kind of be quiet. You might not even want to be there. You're looking for other people around you's perspective on that candidate. So if you already have an organized business, staff, team, you would want them to be on that. If this is your only hire, you might want to go get some trusted other agents inside the office to serve on that group interview process. Hey, I just want to know what your perspective is. Even like Dave Ramsey, he has a mandatory. You have to go to dinner with him and his wife before he'll ever hire anybody because he wants to see how you gel in a social situation and he wants to see what his wife and just some of the other people in there does. He actually did something back in the day where he would show up to the restaurant early that they were meeting at. He would tell the waiter and the waiting staff to screw up the order of the candidate because they wanted to see how that candidate would respond. Does the candidate are they rude or demeaning to the wait staff? Do they just don't even mention it and don't even bring it up? Like he would always do those little things out there. I like to go to dinner sometimes as well. And then the other thing that you're going to ask for is references. I'll tell you, this is the most important step that everybody skips, and it drives me crazy. Lindsay, raise your hand and say, I'll never skip this step ever again. Just kidding. Everybody skips a step. References. It's so crazy to me that rainmakers, staff, I see people doing it all the time. Someone leaves a position with someone, and then next thing you know, 2 weeks later, they're working from someone else, and that person that hired them didn't even pick up the phone and call the previous employer. Drives me crazy. Like, you don't want to know what happened in that scenario, even in our trusted Keller Williams ecosystem. So they'll usually give you references when you have them fill this out at the end of those interview process. But if you look down here, by signing below, I give Keller Williams Realty permission to contact all of the references that I listed, plus any other people that my references suggest that you, Keller Williams Realty, contact. This is where you want to go 2 or 3 deep. So say I was calling, if this was on Gordon and Gordon put Boyd Brown on there, I would call, I'd talk to Boyd. Most likely, if they write these names down, what have they done with these people on the list? They've called and prepped them, right? They've called and prepped them, and they are probably going to say nothing but nice things about them. That's why when I'm done talking to Boyd, I'd say, Boyd, who else knows Gordon or worked around Gordon that would be great for me to talk to? Can you give me another name? And then Boyd would then give me that second level deep. You want to try to go to the second level, if not the third level, if possible. But then here is a quick little worksheet that will be in this packet as well. It's called the Reference Check Script Worksheet. This is what you want to fill out when you're calling those reference candidates, okay? How is it that you know Gordon? Could you please describe your relationship with him or her? What do you feel Gordon's strengths are? Was he really good at? Blah, blah, blah. And you just want to fill this out and compile these with all the references, okay? And then the very last thing, deciding to hire someone, is called the defense. So you now have 2 giant interviews of those 4 sections of notes. You now have a bunch of reference check worksheets that are compiled. I'd usually end up just with a folder filled with papers on a specific candidate. And then I would arrange a defense meeting. So a defense meeting is where me, the consultant, brings a few people in our business, could be other agents, could be other staff, could be other team leaders or whatever. I'm having to defend why this person is a good candidate. And you want to have a few devil's advocates in the room. They're trying to kind of poke holes in your opinion of why you should hire that person. And that's called the defense. And after the defense meeting, if you feel like you could still highly justify that they're a great candidate for that role, that's when you can move on to actually making a job offer to that person. And then once you actually make the job offer, there's one more thing you got to do in this process called the expectation conversation. So that is the final thing before that candidate starts. It's called the expectation conversation, where you are just getting really clear on expectations with those candidates before they jump in. On a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being completely candid, how honest do you want me to be with you? Most people don't want you to be a 10 honest with them. Sometimes they want a little bit of softness in it, and they want you to be an 8 or a 9. I've had people tell me they want me to be an 8 or 9 because they thought I would be too direct and it would hurt their feelings. So I'm like, all right, I can be an 8. What does that mean to you? Give me an example of when someone was that honest with you, yada, yada. How does someone win with you? How does someone lose with you? How does someone lose with me? How does someone win with me? If a sensitive issue should arise, how would you like me to address it with you? Yada, yada. So you're kind of just getting really on the same page to start your relationship of, employee-employer. I'll tell you, I didn't understand the power of this until I'd done it several times. But even Cameron, I always tell this as a joke, when I was going over this, we were even talking about schedule because he's such a consistent, steady person. He's like, hey, what are the hours that you want me in the office? And I hadn't even actually thought exactly what it was, but I'm like, 9 to 5 p.m. And for a decade, I'll tell you, he was exactly on time at 9 a.m. And by 4:59 p.m. every day, he is walking out of the office. And I'm like, dang it, I should have said 8:30 to 5:30. Just kidding. And then you make the offer and you get agreement on the offer. And even in here, there's some sample offer letters, even orientation schedule. And then that kind of sets you up for the first 30, 60, 90 days of their position, which will be kind of the second version of this class that we will go over in September.
Joni,
Whew, that was a lot. Lindsay, I'm ready.
those questions on that page beforehand, you're doing all of that live? You're not giving
Yes.
them time to like fill that out and then
Nope.
get with
So
you
the
on it?
expectation, I'm doing that live. So normally I'm already at the point that I want to hire them. I actually haven't given them the job offer yet, but I have the job offer ready right there. And then I have this expectation conversation and I say, hey, we are almost there. You are fantastic. Thank you so much for going through this process with me, Lindsay. I know it probably felt like the most, extensive, thing there, but I'll tell you, it is just gonna rocket you into this role. But the very final thing I want to do is I want to just go over some mutual expectations. So we're 100% on the same page, and it will kind of dictate how our relationship goes, throughout the remainder of your employment. And then I'll start going through these, and it's not like even like another interview. It's just a really cool mutual expectation sheet of just, getting to know how they're going to win or lose with each other. So that is that. And then once you're finished just filling these questions out, that's when I'll just slide the job offer over and be like, hey, I'd like to extend this offer to you. Blah blah blah. You can explain the offer. If they're ready to go right there, do it. Sometimes they want to just hurry and talk to their spouse one more time or sleep on it or whatever. And by the next morning, they might call you and accept the position. Rarely do you go down this road. I've only had this happen one time in like probably, I don't know, 100 getting to the total end of this. That they did that, everything was great, expectations, job offer, all that. The next day, he called me and said, "I actually decided I want to go down this road." And I'm like, "What?" I'm shocked. So, all right. Well, that's it for all of the docs and stuff. But any comments, questions? We can have any other discussions you want. Otherwise, we'll close out for the meeting.
Johnny, I had an interesting conversation with Boyd this last week about the cost of a bad hire that came back to him even now after you started as his team leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, that cleanup of that prior team leader that continues to kind of haunt him. Go over the cost of a bad hire and not going through this process and just winging it.
Yeah, when I calculate like assistants, say you have a bad assistant you bring in, I see a lot of our rainmakers that are running a million miles an hour, they're tornadoes of productivity. They just cheat the process. They bring in some sort of assistant. It's not just the cost of the money that you paid them, it's the cost of the training that you've given them, it's the cost of your time and energy. It is the cost of software ramping up, that type of thing. It's even the opportunity cost of not having the right person in the role. I think even having someone a month or two in a high productive real estate agent, it could cost you definitely thousands, if not up to like 100,000. I think leadership roles, especially if you've had them in there for a while, like, I've had several OPs say that the cost of a bad hire in the team leader role ends up being in the millions of dollars that it's cost them, because you sometimes just even when it's high level leadership, you don't know how far someone could be moving your organization in the wrong direction. But it's never not been at least 10, 15,000 bucks, even just if it worked out a week or two. Steve, what were you going to say?
Is there a place that I can pull up my KPA that I did? Is it stored somewhere?
Yeah, I'm assuming it should be in your South Valley Market Center KPA. Normally it's just kpa.kw.com. And then each market center just has their one login. A lot of times it's the MCA that will control it. Otherwise, sometimes the team leader will have that login. But Amy should know that login and you can hurry and pull it up. But I usually like to just see now that you've gone through this, all right, how did I show up in all those other job matches? But then even just going through your own assessment just helps. I've gone through mine 50 times probably. So.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I
What
got.
else? What else, anybody? Jake, what about you? You've been paying attention. Any ahas from you, buddy? What mistake have you made that now you're committed to not making anymore, Jake?
I'll really chime in on the references thing on how important they are. I was able to on a recent hire we just made. It was the ceiling deal for us was one of the references that he provided and the deep questions I had. Even the guy I was talking to about his reference, he's like, nobody's ever asked me these questions before. And so I would lean into that because it's really telling, ultimately, he recommended him and said, you know, it just didn't work out in this situation, but I would partner with him any day of the week, you know, and it's like, that's a strong statement. And I wouldn't have got that if I didn't really dive into the references and you know, follow that process and ask those detailed questions.
Yeah. Jake, I owe you lunch. Anybody on this call that actually goes through their next hiring process and calls at least 3 references, I'm buying you lunch because I'm so happy that you're following the process. You know what's funny too is when I was interviewing builders to build my home like 4 years ago, one of the builders, I was down to like 2 builders. One of the builders, I asked for references because I even was going to call references on my builders, even vendors. I do it in a lot of different capacities. The builder gave me some references, and 3 of the 4 references that the dude gave me said I would not build with this guy. Like, absolutely, I would not build. I'm like, what? Why did he give me bad references from the start? But it just killed the deal for me pretty quick, and I ended up using the different builder. So it's funny. Cool. Anybody else?
I just posted the link to all the resources on Connect for that you can download a lot of the different job items.
Cool. Cool. Oh, and the other tool in the KDB Connect, the leverages, they have a job profile that kind of helps you understand what the missing persons report is. So that's one of the things that he's got in there too, is the job profile. So if you're looking for an administrative manager, boom, pull up the job profile, and it's probably already given you a good description of what you should be looking for in that candidate, and then you can just edit it and add a bunch of other ones. They have it for agents, they have it for pretty much every position in the sales or the staff of a market center. So cool.
To that point, Johnny, we were trying to hire for a land development project manager, right? But we utilized the Keller Williams KPA, more or less put it in a project management role, but it crossed over so well that a lot of the things really answer the question. So I would say, like, don't, if it's not the exact role that you're trying to hire for, still do the KPA process because you'll find a ton of things that cross over and will, you know, really show you what you're looking for.
Yeah. What do you do when you make a bad hire? No, Lee? Like that one?
Make your MCA fire them.
Exactly. Have your MCA, local MCA, do all the firing. Just kidding. You've probably heard the slogan, hire slowly, fire quickly, right? Hire slowly, fire quickly. Even when we've asked Gary that, hey, what do you do when you end up with a bad hire? He just says, fix it fast. Fix it fast is what he says. So leaving someone that's not a fit in your organization is not only destructive and a disservice to you, but it's a disservice to them. You know, like you should use you in the leadership role, even beyond just your organization, of helping navigate people to where they could be potentially the happiest, you know? And this process that we go through is unmatched in any other organization. Like very few companies go this deep. You might know these people or this candidate or whatever better than probably anybody almost in their life, that you could give them a lot of wisdom and life advice. And I pointed some people in better directions that have had to eject out of this process, that decade later, they're still sending me thank yous for at least being bold enough to have those conversations and point them in the right direction. So cool. Anything else before we end? Okay. Thank you so much. You'll get your CE credit. Kimber will handle that. Thanks for being on and attentive. Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic Friday the 13th.
Thank you.
See ya.